Welcome to Super Fast Tortoise, and today we are going over 5 tips to help prepare your mind for cube construction. Pretty much this is a cube primer video. This list of 5 tips was curated from questions people ask me all the time about cube design and a lot of misconceptions people seem to think about cube design. And I will give my advice from my experiences with designing my cube and what I did to make the best of my cube's play value. And we start right now. Starting with tip number 1, break the misconceptions. Here I am going to go over a list of different issues, spitfired so to speak. People overall seem not to realize or connect with or simply don't think about because they are more acclimated with other formats because cube is its own format. First, Birds of Paradise, Deathcap Cultivator, Noble Hierarch, Radiclaw Mystic, Avacyn's Pilgrim, and cards like these are green cards. They are not multicolored cards, and they should go into your mono green selection. Counter spells are removal spells, but bounce spells like Unsummon are better for combat reasons overall. Limited formats are won by creatures in combat 98% of the time. Mind Control, in Bolas's Clutches, Control Magic, Corrupted Conscience, Sower of Temptation, and cards like these are removal spells for blue. The BREAD RX acronym is important to build your cube around. BREAD RX stands for Bombs, Removal, Evasion, Aggro, Draw, Ramp, and Mana Fixing. If you want to understand more about this acronym, go watch my video on Top 5 Tips for MTG Drafting for newer players. Also, I get asked about how much removal is too much removal or not enough removal in the cube. The answer is, if a card is not a part of your strategy or theme, exasperate each color for its scope. The scope is your removal, mana ramp, draw cards, and board wipes, and you want to even this out as much as possible. What you want to do is to abuse the hell out of this portion of your cube, and what I did for my cube is I took each monocolored section in the cube and pumped each color with what they do best in participation to the scope. For example, green, put a ton of ramp in. Blue, put a ton of draw in. Black, a ton of creature removal in. White, a ton of board wipes, etc., etc. I kept them all to the scope. Then, as I edit the cube with the color pie, I can even it out between the colors and smooth and polish the drafting experience. I went with this process to force people into multicolored strategies and influence their draft packs. And finally, in the misconceptions section here, the cube is not a collection of cards you build decks from. The cube is a draft pack simulator, and you should build decks from the packs that you make from the cube. So your primary focus when building the cube is fine-tuning your cube and to gauge it to the packs that you can make from the cube. Which leads us to tip number 2. Do not build decks in colors. Don't build the green deck in green or the red deck in red. Don't think of decks to put in your cube. Nobody is going to build your decks. In fact, building a deck for a color is more of a problem when building your cube, rather than thinking of cards to build draft packs from. So, think of each color as a card pool. You want the cards in each color to be calculated to the highest quality of draft pack design and how cards will perform. Try to keep in mind the thought, would you first pick that card? The draft pack simulation is what you are striving to perfect, and this is to increase the play value of the cube. I would suggest learning and tinkering with how your cube performs by making random draft packs and seeing the cards that you can pick in a draft session. Don't be afraid to ask your friends after games about how they made their decisions when drafting, and what picks that caught their eye, what cards they saw that turned them towards another color, and also ask what cards to see that they did not put in their decks. This is to give you a better perspective of what can be replaced or cards that are underperforming. Now on to tip number 3. Your strategies suck. A lot of new cube builders try to complement deck strategies that only work in constructed or commander formats that they are more familiar with. They try to build cubes from formats you can double or quadruple down on a single card with multiple copies of, or have different cards that do the same thing, like functional reprints. Which, note, is not a completely bad idea. But in the cube limited environment, you can only afford to have the win conditions of strategies with some support cards and some signpost cards, because this is a 40 card deck format. The problem most people run into is not connecting the idea that the draft packs don't put strategies together, but are only a handful of random cards. 15 random cards. A key trick to deciding on which strategies and themes to run in your cube is to find spells, abilities, and keywords you can get a ton of that are in at least 3 different colors in your cube overall in order to over-exasperate the win conditions of. This is because you need to be able to slam these win condition strategies into an overabundance as much as possible in order to see them in your draft packs more frequently, especially in your larger up to 720 card cubes. And how do you choose these cards? Simply by tip number 4. Pick a card for the greater good. Choosing a good card when building your cube or trying to replace a card is more often than not tougher than it looks, especially when trying to keep up with strategies that can cross-pollinate in other strategies and colors of decks. I made a list of 6 questions. With this list, you are trying to checkmark as much as possible to see if a card should be in the cube for the greater good. The more questions you can answer yes to with this list, the more likely you are wanting to actually put this card in the cube. Starting with number 1. Does the card improve its archetype? Does it fit the theme of its colors? Does it give the cube an advantage for its color that other cards in the same color don't? Number 2. Does the card fit in any color combination of decks? If the card is Simic, can it fit into all 3 Bant, Temur, and Sultai colored decks and also be an improvement for the cube and those decks? Number 3. Is the card versatile for different strategies, or is it only good for a specific archetype? Can it work in other archetypes? Number 4. Does the card improve more than one strategy, or does it double down on a single strategy? Does the card improve the overall color's power level? Number 5. How high is the pick ratio in a booster pack? Make a few packs from the cube with cards you are wanting to replace with the new card. Slide that card into each pack with the cards you are deciding upon, and see if you'd actually choose that card over the others. And finally, number 6. Is the card good enough by itself? If it's a permanent card or removal spell, and is it hard for my opponents to deal with? Or does it deal with the Bread RX acronym? Follow this list of questions and you will see the fruits of your labor in the games you play after drafting from the cube. And for tip number 5, the colorless section is the clay of the cube. Non-basic lands are kept apart from the colorless and colored sections of the cube, so I can keep the non-basic lands at an even number. For example, if I have 10 Orzhov lands, I have 10 lands of every other dual type, and the same goes for my colorless utility lands, not being influenced by my colorless spells section. I treat the colorless spells selection of the cube as a flexible and form-fitting part of the cube. This is so I can add or subtract cards from this selection in order to keep the numbers even in the colored and multicolored spells of the cube. Even in a 360 card cube, you want your colored card count as even as possible, and that is hard to do unless you have your colorless section be malleable and able to manipulate to make the colored cards count in even numbers. So the colorless section of the cube is to be form-fitting for the betterment of the cube. So colorless cards will not match the numbers game when keeping colors even. I also use the colorless section of the cube to put in cards that support colors with aspects they lack, like drawing, removal, big creatures, etc. I put in everything I can so colors that lack aspects of the BRED RX acronym get the support they need and don't have. So in short, I designed the colorless section to function as best as I could with every color in the cube to be form-fitting so I can give and take for the greater good of the cube. And thank you for watching my video. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. And if you have any other questions about cube design that you would like me to answer in a future video, drop them in the comments below of this video. You guys are amazing.
It's not that bad.